What is up, everybody? Welcome to Truth and Transparency. It's a Wednesday deep dive, very important topic. So, good evening to the members, subscribers, lurkers, everybody out there. Welcome. We're going to tie in the DoorDash driver and explain a little bit about the company that the DoorDash driver keeps and what this led to. So, again, good evening. Here we go. Hello to everybody. Hello. Okay. What you guys are looking at here is a published opinion, and everybody's probably wondering, who's Lars Ronson Braun? Molly, the DoorDash driver, she had a friend named Janelle. Janelle went by Ivory, her middle name, according to Jimmy, who is Molly's boyfriend, fiance, owner of the white truck. Okay. Molly is allegedly the DoorDash driver from the Idaho murders at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, Molly would take DoorDashes with not just herself, but with other people. Don't know if she was with anybody that night, but I do believe that there's a possibility, a strong one, that in fact, if she was using her own account and if she was a DoorDasher, that she would have been with somebody. Now, Molly's friend Janelle goes on a joyride with the truck, and that's what led us to find out who Janelle is. And then I looked into who the fuck Janelle is. Janelle is the daughter of Lars Braun, Braun. Okay. Lars. Okay, ready? Lars was the defendant in a case that I'm going to talk about, which is the victim's name is going to be called Jane. Okay. So Jane knew the defendant Lars' children, Janelle and Olin. So Jane knew the defendant's children, Janelle and Olin, through her ex-husband and reached out to the defendant over the internet in the winter of 2013 to discuss his children, aka Janelle Olin, whom she was worried about. At the time that Jane reaches out to Lars, she is 20 years old and he is in his 50s. Again, she was 20 years old at the time that she believed the defendant was 50 or 52. They developed a friendship and started communicating online. The reason that she reached out was because of Janelle and Olin's methamphetamine use. Now, Jane and Lars developed a friendship and started communicating online. Jane, the victim, was feeling very lonely in her marriage, and within a month or two, she was spending several hours a day talking online with the defendant, Lars. Jane admired the defendant's education, and he made her laugh, and eventually they began to talk on the phone, and the relationship grew into a romance. Although within that, the defendant would flatter Miss Jane and reject her at the same time, sending mixed messages. The victim, Jane, confided in the defendant about the loneliness that she felt within her marriage, and the defendant suggested to her that if she would cheat on her husband, it would rekindle the romance. Specifically, he encouraged her to have sex with him in order to help her marriage with her husband. The defendant, Lars, was also married at the time, and Jane believe that they shared the experience of being dissatisfied within their marriages. In May of 2013, the defendant, Lars, paid for a hotel room in Spokane. The victim, Jane, where she was living at the time, was Ellensburg, Washington. And she drove from Ellensburg, Washington, where she was living, met him up in Spokane, and the two had sex. They spent the night together, and Jane believed the defendant really cared for her in a way that she had not experienced previously. Jane eventually told her husband about the affair with Lars, and the defendant became furious with Jane because he was afraid that the relationship between he and Jane would be used against him in his divorce and custody case. Lars, the defendant, told her he did not want to see her anymore and stopped speaking to her. Then on some random night, Jane went to a party and had sex with a man. And while she was with this other person, Lars called her out of the blue and started screaming at her through the phone. Lars, the defendant, called Jane names like slut and made very possessive and jealous statements to her, which was confusing to her because he had told her that he did not want to talk to her ever again and don't ever speak to me. Over the next few days, Jane repeatedly apologized to the defendant, Lars, and they rekindled their friendship. She had moved into her parents' house, Jane did, and her mom was struggling with alcoholism, which is another thing she and Lars discussed because he told her his mother had also been an alcoholic. In June of 2013, Jane took the Greyhound bus from Spokane to Ellensburg to visit the defendant, Lars, to have sex again. He told her she was his girlfriend and that he wanted her to come so he could introduce her to his friends. But when she came, he hid her from everyone and told her that it's because it was a small town and everybody would know. He made her go by a fake name. He would purchase alcohol and they would drink together. She wasn't 21 yet. If you go check up Lars's record, you're going to see buying alcohol for a minor. It's on there. At one point during this time, Jane was visiting the defendant, and he left her alone with his roommate, Dave. No connection to the interviewee that I had. As soon as the defendant left, Dave began making sexual advances towards Jane and telling her, quote unquote, Lars will not care if we have sex, end quote. He attempted to force himself on her, but she cried hysterically, telling him to stop. He stopped, and she went to the bathroom, locking herself in. She kept texting the defendant, Lars, to come home, and he returned when she was in the bathroom. He accused Jane of doing things to lead Dave on and told her if she did not like it, she should have fought him off. He told her she encouraged Dave. He discouraged her from reporting the incident to the police. She did get examined at the hospital after she returned to Spokane. During that same trip, the defendant allowed his 6 or 7-year-old son to get into the bed where Jane was sleeping nude with the defendant. The defendant minimized the victim's concerns about the son seeing her naked. At 2 a.m. in the morning, after a sexual assault, the defendant drove, Lars is the defendant, drove Jane, and we're using the name Jane, to the bus station and dropped her off without a ticket, telling her she had to go home. She did not have a ticket, but begged the bus driver to let her on the bus and she went back to Spokane, where she went to the hospital. She became depressed and quit her job. She was working at Jack in the Box. Living with her parents became difficult, and the defendant Lars offered to let her stay with him. In late June, she came and moved to Ellensburg with enough stuff to stay indefinitely with him, and he told her they would, quote unquote, play it by ear for her to live with him, end quote. Lars still pretended she was just his friend, continued to have her use the nickname Kathy, and provided her with alcohol all the time. They were sexually involved. In September 2013, he told her for his birthday that he wanted to have a threesome with another woman. He told her that the reason he cheated on his wife was because she had refused to engage in a threesome with him and another woman. They found a couple online in, I don't know, is it Arifta or Rada? I don't know. It's another city over in Washington. And they sent messages and photos back and forth and arranged to meet and all have sex together. So Lars, Jane, they get into a vehicle and drive over to, they drive over to this couple's house. The defendant was drunk. Jane was apprehensive about the encounter, and the couple were trying to make her comfortable. The defendant tried to direct the woman to do things with Jane, but the woman was insisting that Jane was not comfortable. While Jane engaged in sex with the couple, Lars left her alone with them and went and took a nap on the couch, making her feel burdened to perform for the couple, even though the experience was supposed to be for the defendant's birthday present. Jane felt terrible after the encounter. Lars told her the encounter, quote unquote, didn't count because the woman was too old. So Jane arranged another encounter with a couple in Yakima. And this was arranged online. They exchanged messages and pictures. They met at a bar where the woman worked in Yakima and left the bar with just the man. Lars told the victim, Jane, she needed to have sex with the man because the defendant wanted to see the look on the man's face after he had sex with Jane. The man got very aggressive with Jane, and eventually the woman came home from work and the defendant went into the other room with that woman, leaving Jane alone with this man, even though she asked him not to leave. In December of 2013, the defendant, Lars, moved to Florida with a woman named Susan in Jacksonville. Just ups and moves to Florida, leaving Jane in Ellensburg with a plan to join him in the future. From July to December, while living in Ellensburg, Jane was completely reliant on the defendant, Lars, for housing, food, and all of her expenses. The defendant also supplied a large amount of alcohol to Jane. She indicated they were drinking and drunk a lot, all the time. After the defendant moved to Florida, Jane moved back with her parents in an apartment in Spokane. She was unemployed and lonely, wanting to be with the defendant. The defendant told Jane to post advertisements on Craigslist to have sex with other people and one person offered to pay for this encounter. When she told Lars about it, telling him that it was ridiculous, he encouraged her to engage in this prostitution, telling her that that would turn me on. That would be sexy. I've always wanted you, to date like a prostitute or a promiscuous woman, end quote. Lars started working with Jane to post ads and also to reply to the advertisement she posted, including telling her how much to offer herself for and for how long. He told her to get the make and model of the car prior to the encounter so that if he did not hear from her, he could find her. Not a license plate, just the make and model of the car. Jane was hesitant to have sex with people for money, but the defendant had told her on several occasions that he would get bored if he just had sex with her. They needed extra partners. That he needed the thrill of more people and that she would not be enough for him. He told her if she did not prostitute herself, he would eventually cheat on her. He promised her that if she would have sex with other people for money, he would love her. Jane started having sex with people for money with the defendant's help. He would request that she take pictures while she was with other men and send them to him. On one occasion, when she sent the pictures he requested of her with the other man, he got angry at her and told her in quotes, "You sure look like you're having a fun time," end quote. He was encouraging the encounters and then also berating her for doing them. In May or June now of 2014, Jane moved now to Florida. So, basically think about it. December, January, February, March, April, May, 5-6 months. She's doing that in Ellensburg, and then moves back to Spokane, during that 6-month period doing this. And then, okay, now all of a sudden, because Lars is out in Florida at this woman, Susan's home, who is more her age. She's 59 right now, Susan. So she, again, his age. Jane is going to move to Jacksonville, okay, and live where Lars is living with this woman, Susan. While living in Florida, they were often homeless, drank a lot of alcohol, and had several violent encounters where the police were called. Jane went to jail for an assault on the defendant. They were constantly fighting verbally and physically. Jane also went to jail on several occasions for being intoxicated in public. While drunk, Lars would berate the victim, calling her names, and on one occasion strangling her. While he was on top of her, he spit phlegm and saliva all over her face, refusing to let her sleep. Every time she would fall asleep, he would wake her up, even though she had to be at work at 4 a.m. the next morning. From this point forward, she was afraid of the defendant. This event always was in her mind. On one occasion, he purposely broke her Wii, a gift from her parents. She attempted to leave the relationship on several occasions, but always ended up going back to him. While in Florida, he continued to post advertisements on Craigslist offering Jane for sexual encounters with other people. He would ask her to dress in revealing clothing, go to bars, in quotes, go to bars and try to arrange sexual encounters with patrons at the bars. During the sexual encounters, the defendant would sit in the room and watch TV while Jane had sex with the men. Sometimes he would offer Jane to men for sex in exchange for them buying him just drinks. Jane believed it was sexually gratifying to the defendant for her to have sex with other people, and she continued to do it in order to please him. He would bribe Jane with alcohol and promises that he would also engage in sexual encounters with her in order to get her to have sexual encounters with other men. On one occasion in Florida, when they were fighting, he told her he was going to F her in the right there. She told him no, but he forced his penis into her anus with no lubrication. It was a very painful situation for her, and she could not sit afterwards for quite some time, a couple of days, because of the pain. Jane continued to engage in sex with men for money, with encouragement from the defendant to post advertisements and get it done before he came home from work. Often he would suggest this when they needed money for rent or gas, money for their truck. They used the money for extended stay hotels, gas, food, and a lot of alcohol. In June of 2015, Jane got arrested for domestic violence and was taken to jail. She was in jail for 35 days. And while she was there, Lars came to visit her and told her he was leaving and moving back to Ellensburg and told her to call him when she got out. When she was released, all of her personal property had been disposed of by the hotel where they had been staying at the defendant's direction. She had her debit card and her last paycheck from her job, which was enough money to buy a Greyhound bus ticket to Spokane, and she returned. She also had a track phone from either the defendant or her dad, and when she was released, she contacted him and eventually returned to Ellensburg to live with him again. She believed the defendant still cared for her, and so they lived together at Bill. It's Thuleans, so Thulin's house, with Bill and his girlfriend, Donna Woods, Woods. While living there, they started using methamphetamine together. Ellensburg. Lars also started to arrange for Jane to have sex with Mr. Bill in exchange for methamphetamine several times a week. The defendant would want a payment of the meth first, so Bill would set out an amount of meth. Jane would bring to the defendant in their bedroom and give it to the defendant to smoke. And then she returned to Bill's room while the defendant was smoking the meth and, quote unquote, earned the meth by performing oral sex on Bill. This happened very frequently. If Jane wanted any of that meth in addition to earning it from Bill, she would also then have to earn it from the defendant by being his quote-unquote little meth whore and engaging in any sexual activity he preferred, including BDSM and any sexual encounters involving other people. The defendant also, Lars is the defendant also started to arrange sexual encounters with other people where Jane was not involved. He used his own email and also Jane's email to arrange sexual encounters, often impersonating Jane. He would ask Jane to post advertisements indicating she was interested in having another woman perform oral on the defendant while Jane watched, even though she did not have any interest in that. He would often manipulate and deceive her about the advertisements he posted offering her for sex to people. Jane became addicted to methamphetamine and relied on the defendant for her supply. Now, who's Lars? Lars is Janelle's dad. Jane and Janelle knew each other right around the same age. Bill and the defendant also arranged for Jane to have sex with a man named quote unquote Bob, making her go out front to meet him so he could see her first. Bob and Jane went into the room and had sex with Bob, and Bill took the money. 2 other occasions she had sex with Bob and gave the money to Jane, who then would give it to the defendant. On another occasion, the defendant was stealing from the gas station where he worked, which was owned by Bob. When Bob discovered the defendant was the one who was stealing, He agreed to allow Bob to have sex with Jane in exchange for Bob not calling the police on the defendant for stealing from the gas station. Jane began regularly having sex with people in exchange for drugs or money as arranged by the defendant. He would post the advertisements, respond to the advertisements, make all the arrangements, transport Jane to and from the encounters, and take the money. When Jane told him she did not want to prostitute herself, he would tell her just to do it and make promises about what he would feed her and how he would treat her as if she would comply. Jane had several encounters that left her with physical pain. The defendant would respond by telling her, "My poor Shelley got tore up," end quote, and let her get high and take care of her. She felt loved by him doing this for her. One time in their truck in Ellensburg, he slapped her in the face and the police responded. She refused to cooperate with the police because if he went to jail, all of her belongings would be in his truck and she had no way to move it and he would be angry at her. There were other documented reports of police responding to places where Jane and the defendant were for wellness checks, for welfare checks. He would call Jane a slut, a whore, a 20-year-old slut who told her she was easy and nicknamed her Little Floozy. He called her Slutty Shelley and told her that other people would not be okay with her sluttiness, but that he understood, and she was lucky he would put up with her. He constantly told her she was promiscuous, open, and a maniac. He called her a F toy, and one time drew a bucket with sperm going into it and wrote, "Shelley is a slutty cum bucket" on the page. I didn't even see that part last time. At the time, she felt like the care he put into the details of the drawing were a sign he cared for her. Her brain interpreted a graphic sexual dehumanizing picture as a compliment. He would often leave out details of the sexual encounters he arranged for her, and sometimes he outright was dishonest, making deals with the customers and not telling her the parameters of the arrangements. He would often promise that her that if she performed in the way that he wanted, he would marry her and have children with her, something she desperately wanted. He also promised that if she got his name tattooed on her back, he would get one of her name. She did get a tattoo of his name. He did not get one of her name. He told her the reason people did not like her is because she did not understand her need to be loose and sexual, but that he loved her. He would keep track of the number of men she had sex with and tell her the number and call her a slut. He would use the number to pressure her, making her feel ashamed and that she now owed him sexual favors because she had been sexually active with so many people. Jane became accustomed to being referred to as property and being talked about like she was not present. People saying, "Can I have Shelley?" or "Can you send Shelley over?" The defendant liked to see how far he could push push Jane, that he would just call Shelley, that's not her name, to do things that made her uncomfortable. It felt like to her like it was a game to the defendant to get her to freak out, arranging things without her knowledge or consent and making her own rules or goals for what she should or to do or perform. The defendant would arrange sexual encounters for Jane without her knowledge or consent. On one occasion, she was working at Jack in the Box, and the defendant arranged for her to have sex with an African-American male. He specifically told her he wanted her to have sex with a black man without telling her. The defendant sent the man pictures of Jane, and he came to Jack in the Box as she got off work and told her she was supposed to have sex with him in exchange for a ride home. She refused to go with the man and was scared, hiding in the back room, crying. Eventually, the defendant texted her, "Ha ha ha, got you," and came to get her from work. In May of 2016, the defendant had been fired from his job at the gas station, and Jane was laid off from Jack in the Box. They had been asked to move out of Bill's house because his girlfriend was upset at the arrangement they had for Jane to have sex with, obviously, Bill. The defendant and Jane started sleeping in their car. While they were homeless, the defendant arranged for them to use someone's shower in exchange for Jane will have sex with you. When she told the defendant she did not need a shower that bad and that she did not want to do that, he told her, well, don't you effing think that I want to shower? There were other arrangements made for them to stay in an apartment in exchange for Jane having sex with the apartment owners. The defendant continued to arrange for Jane to have sexual encounters with other men at the apartment in exchange for money. The defendant would impersonate the victim and engage in messages indicating that Jane wanted the encounters. But when Jane would appear, it was obvious she did not want to perform, and sometimes the men would be so confused because they thought she was a willing participant based on the messages the defendant was sending and pretending to be Jane. There were many occasions where the defendant would make the arrangements, and if Jane deviated from his plan, for example, the plan was for sex to happen in a car, but instead the John wanted the sex in his house. She was afraid of the defendant's response, afraid she would, quote unquote, get in trouble if she deviated from his plans. He dictated how and when the encounters would happen, including how long they should last. If Jane took too long, she would get in trouble with the defendant. In August of 2016, the defendant was in jail and told the victim to get him out. She assumed he meant for her to prostitute herself in order to get bail money. She had sex with men in exchange for the money to bail the defendant out of jail. On most occasions, the victim would work alone. But in one instance, when working with a guy for sex in exchange for money, he indicated he had a girlfriend that he wanted Jane to work with, for the both of them to have sex with other men for money. It was obvious to Jane when she met the woman that the woman had some sort of mental handicap. Jane, who was already uncomfortable with the arrangement, believed it was wrong to take advantage of this woman. The defendant posted an advertisement on Craigslist offering both of them to men for sex in exchange for money, and titling the ad as BOGO, BOGO, buy one, get one. A man came and picked them both up and drove them very far out of the city. Jane tried to protect the vulnerable adult from having to do anything sexual, even though the advertisement posted by the defendant had offered both of them. There was a second, quote-unquote, customer who responded to the advertisement for sex with both of them, and Jane told the woman, "You don't have to do this." The defendant had the woman give him oral sex and also took her to Bill's house and told her to give him oral sex. Bill was upset because she was obviously vulnerable, but the defendant and Bill just laughed about it. I'm sorry, Jane was upset because of the situation, and Lars and Bill just laughed about it. On one occasion, the John whom the defendant arranged for Jane to have sex with left her tied to a tree while he went to Taco Bell and was gone for over an hour. When Jane did not perform to the defendant's satisfaction, taking too long or enjoying the experience too much, or not following the defendant's rules about the encounters, she would, quote unquote, get in trouble. This meant that the defendant would purposely set up encounters with Johns who were not kind to Jane. He would do this on purpose to punish Jane. He would yell at the victim and would be unfaithful to her, or send emails alluding that he would be unfaithful on purpose for her to see. He would explicitly describe his efforts to arrange sexual encounters for himself with other women to be unfaithful. Sometimes he would punish her by ignoring her, sometimes for days. On one occasion, while performing oral sex on a John in front of the defendant, the victim began choking and vomiting. She swallowed her own vomit and continued performing. She could not breathe and was trying to tap the defendant or kick her legs to get his attention, and the defendant got angry because he thought she meant she was enjoying it too much with that man in a way that she did not give it to him like that. The defendant left her there and said, "You can take her home." There were particular Johns who were mean to the victim, including one they referred to as quote unquote trailer guy. And he would threaten her by saying, quote unquote, trailer guy is coming over if he were angry at her. One time he arranged a meeting at a hotel with trailer guy because he was angry at Jane, and she begged him not to leave the hotel room because she was afraid of how trailer guy always physically hurt her during their sexual encounters. But the defendant left her alone in the hotel with the man he knew would hurt her physically. The victim, Jane, became completely dependent upon the defendant. All of her belongings were in his truck. She did not drive. She felt that she had no choice but to do what he wanted. If she did not, she would suffer. When she had painful or negative encounters with the Johns, the defendant would comfort her and then arrange for her to continue to have sex with him in exchange for drugs or money. He controlled her access to birth control and encouraged her to have unprotected sex. She had a difficult time engaging in the sexual acts when sober, so he would provide alcohol or meth to help numb her. There were times that he insisted she perform while sober, even though it made her physically sick to do so. She would often vomit. Early in the summer of 2015, he began to keep a list of customers, including their names, contact information, and gave them a ranking similar to a grade scale, ranging from A to F. When the defendant believed the victim was, quote unquote, enjoying the sexual encounters too much, even though she was complaining, he would punish her or make her engage in specific sexual encounters with him immediately following the sex with the strangers. On one occasion, the defendant arranged for Jane to have sex with two men in exchange for money to repair their truck. The defendant told her she had to do it because they needed the money to fix the truck. In the encounter with the second man, he was very violent to the victim and took longer than the defendant was expecting. The man was holding down Jane's head on the bed, and the defendant came and knocked on the door. Jane yelled to him that she could not get up. The man ejaculated, and the victim, Jane, got up and let the defendant into the room. She went to the bathroom where she was bleeding from the violent encounter with the John and in a lot of pain. The defendant started touching her, saying, "Now it's my turn." When she did not respond, he got angry and yelled at her, "You just F them and you're not even paying me any attention." End quote. She told him that she was hurting and bleeding. She knew that no matter how she felt, making the defendant happy was the priority. The defendant had rules he required Jane to follow, including dictating what she would wear, how she could wear her hair and makeup. He would keep the money and also controlled the phone they would use. She was allowed to keep 20% of the money he would get from John's in exchange for sex. But she had to use those proceeds for things to make her look good, like her hair or clothes. Her portion of the proceeds was also used to pay for their food. Sometimes he would promise to pay for nice meals or food she enjoyed if she would perform the sex acts, but that always came from her cut of the proceeds. The defendant would often take sexual explicit photographs of her to use to send to prospective Johns without her consent or permission. She believed the photographs were for their own enjoyment, and he shared them with others. The defendant would frequently manipulate Jane by promising her a future together with them, specifically that they would have a baby together if she would continue to engage in sex with other men for money. She desperately wanted to have children. In December of 2016 or January of 2017, Lars's father died, and Jane and the defendant moved into the deceased's father's house in Colfax, Washington. At that point, the defendant continued to advertise and offer Jane to people for sexual encounters, but no longer got money. He just forced her to have sex with strangers for his own sexual gratification, even with even without them paying him. Jane believed that she had no choice but to continue to have sex with the strangers who the defendant arranged for, and did not believe she could say no. During this time in Colfax, Jane got very ill from her methamphetamine addiction and general lack of hygiene and self-care. She had several bladder infections. She weighed approximately only 90 pounds. She was starving. She was losing her hair and starting to have seizures, like episodes, and was anemic. The defendant controlled her access to meth, and they lived off of the estate money the defendant got from when his father died. The defendant made her perform sexual favors and acts on him and strangers in exchange for methamphetamine. The defendant would tie Jane to the bed in the bedroom in Colfax. He would tell her he was going to have his son, Olin, come into the room, and sometimes Olin would come in and see her nude, tied to the bed. This was embarrassing to her because she and Olin had been friends before she'd ever started a relationship with Lars. The defendant and his son would joke about sharing Jane for sex in a dehumanizing way. Remember that Olin is Janelle's brother. Janelle found Olin dead from a drug overdose in 2017. In March, we're going to get to that right here. In March 2017, the defendant and Jane took a trip across the country. Who would ever do this? Took a trip across the country to buy a car. And on their way back, Jane got very sick and was hospitalized and released. They were in New Mexico because they went to the Carolinas. Then they came back, then they went to New Mexico. And when they were in New Mexico, they got the news that the defendant's son, Olin, had overdosed and died. They planned to return home, but Jane had a reaction to some medication from the hospital and had to go back to the hospital. She ended up having Stephen-John syndrome and had to be airlifted to another hospital in Texas. While she was in the hospital, the defendant went home to his son's funeral. Jane's parents came to get her from Texas, and she returned to Spokane. On April 3rd of 2017, the defendant texted her that he had a hotel room for them, so she went with him and some other friends and did meth in the hotel in Spokane. While there, the defendant kept telling their friend Mark how sexual Jane was, and Jane realized he was trying to get her to have sex with Mark. She told Mark she did not want to have sex with him, no matter what the defendant had told him. While in that hotel room, she found messages between the defendant and a prostitute in Idaho from the time when Jane was in the hospital. She left the hotel and never went back to the defendant, although he continued to text her and offer her meth. He told her she could only get her belongings that he had left at the house in Colfax back if she would meet with him in person. She refused and never got her things back. She entered a safe house for victims of human trafficking. After she left him, the defendant sent the victim an email telling her he was thinking about hurting himself if she did not come back to take care of him. She was very afraid he was actually going to kill himself, but knew she could not go back to him. The last time he attempted to contact her via email was January of 2018, 9 months after the last time she had seen him. While they were together, Jane believed that she could not live without him based on what he had told her while they were together and the way he controlled her money, drugs, food, and every facet of her life. She believed that no one else would be willing or able to love her because he repeatedly told her that. He constantly told her the only valuable thing she had to offer the world was sex and her body in that way. In their time together, her self-esteem was completely destroyed. While they were together, the defendant isolated Jane from every other person, including her parents, telling her terrible things about her parents and convincing her that her parents did not care for her or want her around them, that they were ashamed of her. After recovery, Jane remembered that one of the phones the defendant had used to take photos and to exchange messages with Johns was in her belongings in Spokane. And she asked her mom to give it to the police. The phone was State's Exhibit 1. The phone had been used to communicate through email with different Johns regarding sexual encounters. There were several email accounts belonging to the defendant and Jane, all used by the defendant. The victim was able to identify several printed emails that were arranging sexual encounters between the defendant and other men involving Jane. See Exhibit States 1 through 17. Jane's mother observed significant physical differences in her daughter during the time she was living with the defendant. She lost a lot of weight. She was almost bald when they picked her up in the hospital in Texas. Her mom described her looking like she was a cancer patient. Her mom also saw her go from a young, vibrant woman with a life to one who had no interest in anything anymore except being with the defendant. Ellensburg Police Department began an investigation into this case in August of 2016 when Jane's parents reported concern for their daughter to the police. Detective Shull, Shull, tried to respond to some Craigslist advertisements he found that he believed to be Jane to try to contact her. He was willing to even arrest her in order to be able to talk to her about what was happening. There was an initial response, but in the end, the investigation did not go anywhere. Eventually, in 2018, Jane gave a recorded statement to the police about the defendant's actions in trafficking her. The police began an investigation and attempts to corroborate as much of Jane's reports as they could, including looking for people who she could identify as being involved. Most people were not able or willing to speak to the police, but they did get a statement from Glenn Stipe, who died right before trial. Detective Shull also examined the cell phone, State's Exhibit 1, that Jane's mother gave to him. The cell phone extraction revealed many communications between the defendant and other individuals, as well as Jane and other individuals related to the prostitution. State's Exhibit 25 was a printout of a representative sample of the conversations on the phone from December 17th of 2016. State's 25, Exhibit 25 was another conversation from the phone from December 19th, 2016. State's 27 was a third representative sample of conversation from the phone with no date. These conversations were consistent with Jane's testimony about how the conversations occurred in the sexual encounter transactions that the defendant secured. State's Exhibit 28 was a printout from the extraction report from the cell phone showing images from the phone that included images of the victim, Jane, tied up, and an image of the defendant. State's Exhibit 29 showed nude pictures of Jane from the phone extraction consistent with her testimony. Lars was the defendant. He asked for a bench trial instead of a jury trial. And the conclusions of the law, the court found the defendant was identified by the victim in court. The defendant is found guilty of count 1, which was recruited, transported, transferred, provided, obtained, bought, purchased, and or received by any means, victim knowing or in recklessly disregarding of that fact, coerce, frauded, would use the victim to engage in sexual explicit acts or commercial acts. And it goes down the list of everything that he was found guilty of. Okay. He goes to appeal this. And in this opinion, I mean, you cannot make this up. And then we're going to get into the weave here, but I wanted to explain to you what these people were doing. Okay, here we go. Right here. Lars once left Jane alone with a man after he had tied her to a tree. She pleaded with him not to leave her alone with the John. Lars left her for over an hour while he ate at a Taco Bell restaurant. On another occasion, while Jane lay roped to a bed, a man sharpened his machete nearby. On another occasion, while Jane lay roped to a bed, a man sharpened his machete nearby. Now, I didn't just go through all of this. I did it for a bunch of different reasons, but that's trafficking. Okay, people have different in their minds. They think of that's how that all happens. Okay, but who are these people, and why would this be important for this case? Well, for a couple reasons. Janelle is Lars's daughter. Okay, Janelle is Lars's daughter. Janelle married a guy named Josh. Okay, Josh's last name is Davidson. So Janelle becomes Janelle Davidson. Joshua Davidson, Janelle Davidson. Janelle and Molly are friends. Okay. Josh moves to, and that would be Janelle. He moves to Moscow, Idaho. And he moves into a house 132 Steiner Ave. That is the corner house right across the street from Lauder. It's Steiner is a street that's in the probable cause affidavit that you're coming off of from Indian Hills Trails over there, which you go right past. Josh Davidson and Janelle have a couple kids. They also have a niece. And the niece lives in Pullman and lives in the next apartment complex over from Brian Kohlberger. As we saw in the body cam and dash cam from the past couple shows, we're still trying to get it to be confirmed, but we want to know if it was customary and that if it was a known thing, that if you were to be in a high speed chase or trying to get away from cops in Moscow, would they eventually stop pursuit because you're crossing over into Washington? And how did that work? That was that girl Janelle, okay, who was driving Molly's car, a truck, which wasn't Molly's, which was originally and is Jimmy's, okay. And I'm just trying to put you guys in perspective of this. Who are these people that were at the crime scene at 4:00 in the morning? Who was Molly with? Was it even Molly? Was it Molly's friend using Molly's account to DoorDash to make money to be able to get funds to pay for their, drugs, blah, 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 blah. 4 a.m. We did a FOIA request. Well, it's a public request. And we did it, what was it? A couple days ago. And you normally will get the first 2 hours for free. Anything that would require more than 2 hours worth of like labor and looking into something and whatever you're getting out of it, then they can charge you. Well, for everything that we wanted, for a very, very, very important reason, it pertained to Janelle, but more importantly, it pertained to an address and instances that would have happened at this address, and or with her name involved. And the first time ever in all the time that I've been doing this with Idaho, just specifically Idaho, they responded and said that this would take anywhere from a 9 to an 11-hour job that I was asking for. And what I was asking for was nothing more than I've ever asked for, with the exception of that I wanted like the 1122 King Road house. I want any and everything that happened at that house from the state to the state. I want anything that happened from this address, and I change it to 1122 Queen. Use 1122 King and use 1122 King because of, what if it was ever put down under that street name. And in this situation, for just 2022, beginning January of 2022 and going until the end of May, beginning of June, it was right when I think it was June 26th that I did, because it was the date intended for the preliminary hearing. And they said that on top of the 2 hours, it would be a 9 to an 11-hour job on top of the 2 that I got for free, and quoted me something like $400 or $500. And I'm like, damn, what you guys doing over there? Maybe hit the jackpot a little bit, right? But I want to show you guys. In this last body cam, one of the last ones, we heard that Janelle, or not Janelle, but we heard Molly say that she was residing in June of 2022. Well, the address that she said was Garfield in Moscow, okay? And on November, nothing about this. Nobody's knowing anything after the homicide's about There's only a certain select people that would have known anything about a white sedan. Okay. And that would have been if you actually had the camera footage that cops were working with you. Hey, we're looking for can you look through your stuff? Or hey, can you give us this? And that could have potentially come out. Police, right? So cops, maybe the person who had the camera and what you're trying to like look for, or hey, what did you saw? What did you see? We're looking at this time frame, and maybe it kind of came out. So maybe the owner of the camera, the footage, the police, nobody else would have or should have known about this white sedan. Okay. Well, I think it's very interesting, and we're going to take note of it. We've taken very special note of it. But on November 23rd, 2022, November 23rd, 2022, before the public knew about anything, but on a very interesting date. Let's see here. I want to read it verbatim. Okay. Suspicious person / circumstance. Okay. Incident address. It's on the corner of Garfield Street and ED Street. Reporting party states he was out walking his dog when he came across a white sedan with a male sitting inside. Officer responded, no report. Now, ready? Yeah. Ready? Why in the world would anybody call because of a white sedan? Just because somebody is sitting in a white sedan. Again, on the corner of ED Street and Garfield. The person that called, the reporting party, states that he was out walking his dog when he came across a white sedan with a male sitting inside. He thought that he should call the police, this person? Why? Why would you ever call the police and say, oh, I happen to see a guy who's in a white sedan on November 23rd, 2022? Just so we're clear, be on the lookout for the white Elantra, the white sedan that went out to the local law enforcement people. That didn't happen yet. The be out on the lookout was not out yet on November 23rd, 2022, not even to local law enforcement. That doesn't come out until 2 days later. You bet your bottom dollar we got that request. Another one. The 500 block of Indian Hills Trails, whatever, at 4 a.m. At 4 a.m. We got a special one coming. Moral of all of this is that the lifestyles that these people that were door dashing lived whether in the past, whether they still live it, whether this was their lifestyle, this was their culture, okay? And that culture is lie, steal, cheat, say whatever, do whatever, okay? Some people have to do it just to survive, okay? But it's become second nature to lie and to say, whatever. And there's different reasons that people do it, out of fear. And then I'm just lying because hey, I don't want to make that person upset, or I'm lying because I'm trying to get, money so that I can score my drugs, whatever, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, that is the culture that was literally at the house at 4:00 in the morning. On the night of the murders at 4 a.m. dropping off a DoorDash. Now that we know, if we think that it's Molly, right, because she's saying it's her, or if it's anybody in her orbit because she loaned out her phone, which is, you need for the DoorDash, and a car to do it, right? But we see how these people drive. We see what's going on. That DoorDash order could have been what? Ordered how long ago? Truly ordered when? And it's these people's words that were used to determine how this investigation went. I got guys with machetes, sharpening their machetes, laying their knives on beds while banging chicks. By the way, we're getting all of it. We trimmed some fat off of some stuff that if we think that it's relevant, then we'll go back and get it. But we'll have that complete for you, as well as like 4 others that we think branch off of it in some way. I'll tell you, the people that are the masterminds behind that are running like the criminal shit. Okay, they're usually the smart ones. Okay, the dumb ones are the ones that are all trickled infested as the addict type people. Okay, and if they were able to create some way, because Ann Taylor what was requested was the communications between the DoorDashers and the people that ordered the DoorDash at that house. They wanted the DoorDash, or it came with it in the search warrant, the communications. Not all criminals are dumb, and I'm curious if there was ways to use DoorDash as a front to successfully move or receive or get stuff or do something that would be illegal. Because the first thing that Molly, I'm just door dashing here. I'm dashing here. I'm dashing. Like, I mean, it was like, that's going to get me out of something. Like, I'm just here. I'm dashing. I'm dashing. I wouldn't want DoorDash to ever know that I got pulled over. Also, everything that she tells the cop is pain is a lie. She had just been pulled over a week prior to that. Then she tells Payne that she is friends with Bill Thompson. Not, I know him. I'm friends with him. After she gets the ticket. That's just when you know someone's dumb. They don't know how to drop names before they're about to get fucking a ticket. You don't wait until after the ticket. You would be dropping Bill Thompson, you know. But whatever happened to that ticket? Whatever happened to the, $130 ticket that she got? And she got pulled over a week before that. And she was pulled over in Washington. So take everything that you're hearing and you treat it as like a circumstance. Okay. And it's like, what are the odds that 4 students would be brutally stabbed to death between the hours of allegedly, supposedly 4 a.m. and 4:25, and literally people that are 150% informants for the police prior to that were right outside and allegedly dropping off a DoorDash, and then now are conveniently, supposedly, witnesses to saying that I saw Brian. Ann Taylor ran the public defender's office. Ann Taylor knows the game. Jane and Lars, that's not like a, oh my God, wow, I can't believe that's such a wild story. No, that's like a normal situation that's surrounding Pullman and that's surrounding the University of Idaho. And that shit, what would be gross and embarrassing. That's the type of shit that to me would be gross and embarrassing if that was to come out in a trial where it would embarrass and be gross to families to have to endure hearing stuff along those, what I just read, where it would embarrass somebody, but where it would be like grotesque. Okay. I'm sorry, but drinking underage is not gross or embarrassing. Who hasn't done that? Trying drugs, not gross or embarrassing. It's college. Moscow, Idaho being, and same with Pullman, filth all around it. Filth all around it. Do you want to send your kid to school there? We can't have people not sending their kids to school here. With that, I submit. Yuri gifted 5 Truth and Transparency memberships. Yo, Yuri. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Esther, 1999 super sticker. Thank you so much. Tana, thank you so much. 5 Truth and Transparency gifted memberships. We got 10 people turning green tonight. Oh, we have another 5. So Yuri back to backer. And thank you so much. A new member, Schwart, 2018. Welcome to the Transparency. Crime Eyes with, is that Patty? Patty CI, are you CI? Kim, welcome. Again, there was about, 1,200 to 1,400 people in here one time or another. Make yourself known. You have an opinion. Bam. We are on the prowl to see what cars were in the orbit of everybody that, you know, was involved with these people. What type of cars did they have? Um, I could see detectives not believing people like a Molly or a Janelle or a, somebody similar to them, right? Their history, like I can't believe that they, what if they said something like, what if they said something that wasn't what's out there right now? What if they saw multiple people? What if they saw a chick? Thank you, Bobby Joe. Appreciate you. Thank you, Lana, for all that you do. Sue. Thank you so much, Sue. There's my girl, Noelle. What's up, girl? 13 months? How's it feel? 13 months. 13 months sober with Lana. But be on the lookout here. Literally the next 5 days, I'm putting out all these videos, and whatever they have, they have. So thank you to all. There's a bunch of Janes out there. There's a bunch of Lars out there. And I don't think too highly of that area. There's only 25,000 people in that area. And when they want to talk about people coming to Moscow, just so we're clear, is that these people that I was mentioning, they didn't grow up in Moscow, Idaho. So you want to talk about outsiders. Go look at the out-of-state tuition and see how many students come from out of state. That anytime you have a campus, a college campus in your town or your area, you are attracting people to come there that aren't from there. And when they say that, drugs breeds other things, because I was always on the path of like, I'm not going to lie to you. Hey, you want to use drugs? Like, just don't come over here rocking. If you just want to go buy your little drugs and get high and do whatever the fuck you want, do whatever the fuck you want, do it over there. The moment that you try to sell to a kid, the moment that you try to steal from elderly people, mess with families, children, I have a problem with it. But it seems like if we're giving passes, if we're the police and we're giving passes to people like this to then be the eyes in the neighborhood, no. Get the fuck out of here. Absolutely not. That's not. These people can't be eyes in a neighborhood. Sorry. You're giving the passes to the wrong people. Please don't write that shit in there. That's not true at all. Jane is not Janelle in this story. If Janelle had any encounters with her father, that's not what I read. So please don't pass that off. That's not true at all. I know who the victim is, and I've spoken with the victim, and that's not who it is. Jane is not Janelle. All right, have a good night.